Mock me again. The laughter sliced through the air of the Sterling room like a blade. Rich, arrogant, and utterly sure of himself, Nathaniel Grant leaned back in his chair, a wine glass in hand, eyes fixed on the woman who had just entered. She was an anomaly in this Manhattan temple of wealth and ego. The Sterling room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a monument to status. Crystal chandeliers dangled from high coffered ceilings, casting golden light onto tables where power plays unfolded beneath white orchids. Every polished surface whispered privilege. To walk through those doors was to declare one's arrival into the city's social elite. And yet, here she was. Her name was Eleanor Brooks. She pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside with nothing but a carry-on bag and the creases of a 20-hour flight from Dubai on her simple black dress. Her brown hair had long since escaped its ponytail. Her shoes, sensible and scuffed, whispered stories of terminals and tight connections. The host raised a skeptical brow. "I believe Lucas is expecting me," Eleanor said quietly. The name made the host straighten slightly. Still, he eyed her like she might have wandered into the wrong dimension. At the central table, Nathaniel's smirk widened. A hedge fund legend, his bespoke navy suit hugged him like armor. His Rolex glinted beneath the ambient light as he motioned subtly toward Eleanor, drawing the attention of his dinner companions. "Looks like someone got lost on the way to the Greyhound station," he quipped loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. Laughter followed. Predictable, mean-spirited, and sharp. Eleanor heard it all, but she didn't flinch. She looked directly at Nathaniel, and for a brief second, something in her gaze made his smile tighten. She was led to a corner table. The waiter, barely older than 25, approached hesitantly. "Perhaps, madam, would prefer our prefix option?" he offered, skipping over the chef's tasting menu. "The full tasting menu, please," Eleanor replied with serene confidence. "Sparkling water for now. I'll decide on wine after I speak with Lucas." The name again shifted the waiter's expression. He nodded and retreated. Nathaniel, meanwhile, couldn't help himself. "You might want to check your credit limit first, sweetheart," he called out. "That menu costs more than your entire outfit." Gasps. Some laughter. The unspoken ritual of elitism was in motion. Eleanor took a sip of her water. "Calm. Collected. I'm sure I'll manage," she said. Nathaniel was used to easy prey. She was ruining the script. "Let me guess," he prodded, voice rising. "Big night out? Bucket list meal? You do realize there's a perfectly decent diner 10 blocks down. Free refills. Paper napkins. Much more your ambiance. More chuckles." A woman in diamonds smirked behind her martini. A man in a blazer looked away. Eleanor looked up. "Thank you for the recommendation," she said. "Perhaps another time." When the waiter returned with her sparkling water, his hand trembled slightly. Nathaniel winked at him, reinforcing the power dynamic. The young man lowered his gaze and vanished. Nathaniel stood. With a practiced ease, he wandered toward Eleanor's table. The whole restaurant watched. "Just trying to save you some embarrassment," he said, feigning concern. "This place has standards, you know. Doesn't it feel a little aspirational?" Eleanor's eyes met his. "Someone like me?" she asked quietly. Her tone made him pause. Not hostile, not weak, just steady. "Let's be honest," Nathaniel shrugged. "You're clearly not from around here." Eleanor folded her hands on the table. "And you're the gatekeeper of quality?" A ripple of unease passed through the room. "Quality announces itself," he declared, gesturing at his suit, his cufflinks. "Just like its opposite." Eleanor leaned forward, her expression transforming. "Interesting perspective." Nathaniel moved closer, mistaking her calm for submission. "I'm doing you a favor. This place eats little strays like you alive." "Mr. Grant," she said, cutting him off. The room froze. "Is public humiliation always your opening move? Or am I receiving special treatment tonight?" Gasps. Heads turned. Nathaniel's face paled. She knew his name. This wasn't chance. "I make it my business to know the regulars," Eleanor said. "Even so," he scoffed, "you still look like you wandered in from the bus station." Eleanor set her glass down. "Mock me again," she whispered. A challenge. A promise. Nathaniel opened his mouth. "Lucas," Eleanor called, her voice calm but firm. From across the room, a tall, silver-haired man turned sharply. Recognition dawned. "Eleanor," Lucas Romano said, abandoning his guests. Within seconds, he was at her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What is happening here?" "This gentleman was explaining your restaurant standards," Eleanor said. Lucas's face darkened. "You were speaking to Eleanor Brooks about standards?" Nathaniel began to stammer. "A bit of harmless. Nothing about disrespect is harmless," Lucas snapped. "Especially not to the woman who helped my wife survive cancer, who funded my son's education, who taught my daughter how to code." A hush fell over the room. "Do you have any idea who Eleanor Brooks is?" Lucas continued. "The woman you mocked built half the hospitals in her home state. She sits on boards that shape international policy." Nathaniel took a step back. "Security," Lucas said. Two staff members appeared instantly. "Mr. Grant is no longer welcome at the Sterling Room, or any of my family's establishments." "You can't do this," Nathaniel barked. "I can't," Lucas said. "And I am. We know the difference between wealth and worth." Through the kitchen. "He doesn't get the front door." As Nathaniel was escorted away, diners looked down. The ones who had laughed earlier now looked ashamed. Lucas turned to Eleanor, taking her hands. "Forgive me," he said softly. "If I had known you were arriving tonight, I would have welcomed you personally." Eleanor smiled. "I came straight from the airport. Didn't want to miss Lily's recital tomorrow." Applause erupted. Not for Eleanor's wealth, but for her grace. Lucas faced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "at the Sterling Room, we measure people by the kindness in their hearts, not the labels on their clothes." 3 days later, Nathaniel stared at his phone from a penthouse above Central Park. The footage had gone viral. Shaky clips of the confrontation. His taunts. Her calm. Lucas's furious defense. His exit through the kitchen. Hashtag #DossyRichBully was trending. He was hemorrhaging followers. Corporate sponsors were backing away. Voicemails from his publicist piled up. "Cannot repair this." Social media blackout. "We'll call tomorrow to discuss exit strategy." Exit strategy. Like he was a collapsing brand. Meanwhile, in a quiet neighborhood in Queens, children played in a backyard while adults laughed over barbecue. Eleanor, in jeans and a blouse, stood beside Lucas by the grill. "You should have seen his face," Lucas laughed. "Some lessons," Eleanor said, "have to be taught in public." Lucas lowered his voice. "Dubai negotiations went well." Eleanor nodded. "Clean water for 5 million people by next year." As dusk settled, no one talked about Nathaniel Grant. Here, status meant nothing. Integrity meant everything. And in the quiet dignity of a woman who refused to shrink, a new definition of power was written. Mock me again, and find out what true worth looks like.